Good morning, this is Doug, Southern Songbird Farm. Just going to do a small series today on, today and over the next little bit. We're going to do a series on basic tractor information, anatomy if you would, horsepower and that kind of thing. Over a basic farm tractor, may get into some operations of it. And the reason why is I had a request to do a small series for this. And for you farmers that's been doing it for years, this may or may not apply to you, and that's okay, because we're trying to help people that are just getting started. We want to encourage young people to get in the farming industry. So what I go over in this video on you is going to be some basic things about a tractor, basic knowledge, horsepowers, weights, that kind of thing that we'll go over briefly. And no, I'm not going to go over every single thing in detail, because I would be here for days. But and I also want to note that as I talk to these things, talk to you all about these things, always remember that you always have an owner's manual to refer to. And if you get an old tractor, owner's manuals can be found on the internet. I've got owner's manuals for 47 models and 52 model tractors right now that I've currently owned or had to work on, that kind of thing. So the first thing I want to get into is what you have to know is, what is your plan? Whether you are thinking about getting started, or you are on a small farm and you have got to the point now to where you just can't do things like you were without a tractor, so you think you need to buy one. Well, number one thing is the piece of equipment that you are going to use. That will tell you a lot about the tractor that you need. For instance, if I have a 4-foot garden tiller, that's a 3-point hitch mounts on your tractor, versus an 8-foot. You go out and you purchase an 8-foot tiller and you go get a 20 horsepower tractor, you're going to be very disappointed, because you're not going to get the result that you want. Another example is if let's just say that you go out and you purchase a roll baler, a 5x5 roll baler, and then you have a little small 25 horsepower tractor, and you're like, well, I think I can do this. You're not going to get the results you want. Okay, so number one is plan. Understand what you're going to do. Look what your projection is down the road and plan ahead. Now, I know that you cannot 100% plan totally ahead, because let's just say that you're planning and you look in your planning book and you say, oh, okay, well, in 5 years I want to be roll baling hay. And maybe the tractor that I don't need to get a huge tractor to roll bale hay with, but I need to do garden work. So there's some things you do have to consider whenever you're wanting to buy a tractor and get in. But number one's planning, and number two, talk to your farmers, talk to your dealers. Those people know a lot about tractors. Okay. The second thing is weights. What kind of loads are you going to be hauling with your tractor? For instance, I'm going to use mine as an example. This tractor setting just like it is, somewhere around 8,000 pounds. Okay, so I have to use feed. I have to have feed hauled in for our meat bird operation, and because I don't have access to them to get to my barn, I have to use what they call a gravity wagon, and it sits on a wagon frame. Well, the unfortunate parts about wagons, the good part about wagons is they can haul heavy loads. The unfortunate part is once you get that load on there, all the load is distributed just over the axles. And when you hook to your tractor, there's no tongue weight to put additional weight on my tractor. So it is literally my weight of my tractor versus my weight of my gravity bed. So if I have any slope at all, I got 4 ton of feed, and so now 4 ton of feed equals out to 8,000 pounds, and I got 8,000 pound tractor and 8,000 pound load. I've got a slope I got to go down. You may or may not do good in that situation. Okay, so understand what you're going to be doing. If you're going to be hauling a lot of hay, a lot of heavy hay bales, you know, you're talking about hay bales, 700, 800, 900 pounds, almost 1,000 pounds on some of them. You put a bunch of them on a wagon and you take off over a hill. If your tractor's not big enough, you know, you're gonna introduce yourself to a problem. So those are things that you need to take in consideration when you go to buy a tractor. Old tractors versus new tractors, the weights are going to be different materials. You know, all the tractors back in the older days, this size, were probably a little bit heavier because every single thing on them was metal. Where this one here has some plastic, like, you know, the dashboard and stuff has some plastic and that kind of thing. But that's some things you got to remember whenever you're planning on buying a tractor. All right, now, one thing we want to get into is old versus new. There is pros and cons to both. Old, number one thing right off the top, older tractors are cheaper initially. New tractors are more expensive initially. New tractors, unless you just have the finances saved up, you're going to have a payment plan. Then you have to think, you have to have the budget for it. You have to have the mindset of, do I want to invest for long term, or is it going to be short term? So those are two things that you got to do. I chose, in my situation, I knew what our projection was. I knew what we wanted to do. And by the time it was all said and done, this tractor here we purchased, and when we purchased it, we got a great financial plan on it. So at the end of the financial plan, at the end of the deal, when this is done, I'm probably going to be cheaper on this one than I was on getting an old one this size. The thing you have to remember about old tractors is they're old, and they are beginning to get wore out. Now, farmers take care of them. That's why they last for 40 years. But eventually, when they get rid of them, they're getting rid of them for a reason. So old tractors, they do have their pros, they do have their pros and their cons. Maintenance-wise, the maintenance needs to be the same, whether it's new versus old. So one big additional thing is with you get a new tractor, you need to remember that it comes with a warranty. Now, let's go back to the owner's manual. The owner's manual specifically tells you a maintenance plan. Now, for the best result for this tractor would be me, follow the maintenance plan, and that means every 100 hours I grease every grease socket. Every 100 hours. After the first initial 50 hours, I had to change the motor oil. After 100 hours after that, then I changed the motor oil again. So that's the kind of thing that you have to remember. And there's also time frames on hydraulic systems and that kind of thing. Okay, one other thing I want to touch base on real quick. Some tractors you have two-wheel drive, some tractors you have four-wheel drive. For me and what I do, two-wheel drive is fine for me. My turning radius can be a little shorter with a two-wheel drive. I'm not as heavy in the front end with a two-wheel drive. But some people like four-wheel drives if they're feeding in the middle of the winter. You do have traction. Four-wheel drive gives you more traction. If you're bush hogging a hillside or something, you may keep the front end up on the hill a little better because it does have traction and that kind of thing. But then when you get on up to the real big tractors, you need all wheels on the ground that you can get to move those big pieces of equipment. But for what we do, I just want to point out that this size tractor right here, for what we do at Southern Songbird Farm, the loader has been absolutely, hands down, one of the greatest things. I'm so glad I got it. If you look at the tractor, this is considered it's about a 58 or 59 horsepower tractor. Do I need that right now? Well, maybe not, only because I'm having to haul feed that weighs as much as a tractor. That's one of the things. But the other thing is if you're paying around, you got these big bales of hay. I have to put these bales of hay out for my cattle. Can I do square bales and get by? Sure, I can. But the plan is one day I hope to do our own hay, and I hope to run my own row baler. And with this size tractor, I can run 4x4, 4x5, 5x5 baler with this size tractor. So we plan for the future. I think that as far as two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive, it's pros, cons, it's what you want, what you don't want. Now, if you go four-wheel drive, it costs you more money. Two-wheel drive costs you less money. Here's the reason why I say that real quick. Let me throw this out here. Okay, for example, this tractor here, if this was four-wheel drive, the tires would be this tall, and they would be cleated like this, which would make them more expensive. So let's just start from there. The rim's bigger, the tire's bigger, okay? So then when you go under here, well, that changes everything under the front end. You have to have a drive shaft that goes all the way the length of your tractor. You have to have a transfer case to transfer power to the front. You have to beef up the front end because you have to have a differential here. And then the steering, all the steering mechanism has to be heavier. So now you're adding substantial weight to this. So there is pros and there is cons. So, but if something happens to the front end, it's going to be more expensive to fix. But it does have a warranty. So I don't know. And one more thing, if you ever want to buy an old tractor, and there's people that love them and people that hate them. I grew up on tractors that had tricycle front ends, that had the narrow front ends. Some people's like, oh my God, those are the most unstable things there ever was. I'm a fourth generation farmer, and we used those until, I don't know, I was 30 years old, and we never had an issue with a tricycle front end tractor. You just have to know that it's all, because right under here is a pivot. Well, if you're in a position to where that pivot makes a difference, if you're on a hillside that steep and the pivot makes a difference, by the time the tractor catches up to that pivot, you're probably too far gone anyway. Now with the wide front end, if you're on a hillside, it may help you a little bit to keep you up on keep you from scooting the front end around the hillside a little bit. But other than that, one more safety feature with the loader. Just remember, as this loader goes up, your center of gravity gets worse. If I'm going straight and I got a load down here, well, as I start to raise that load up and I get the load up here, then I'm putting that much more weight up there, which could have the tendency to turn over. So remember that. And that's where a tricycle front end is worse than a wide front, from the stability of the loader being. What I want to do is I kind of want to go over the basics, anatomy on this particular tractor, and about every tractor is the same. The other difference between old and new is newer tractors have more safety features than the old ones do. And we'll kind of go over that whenever I go over this tractor here and just kind of show you what the anatomy of the tractor is, and then we'll go from there. Every tractor, whether it be old or new, has what they call a workstation. A workstation includes a steering wheel, all your levers, your gears, your seat, lifts, your operations, and that nature. If there's anything outside of that, it's something that's been added on to. Some tractors, the old models, they put things right here on the sides of the hoods. International was big on it. They put some of the lifts and some of the gears and that thing on the side of the hood. Mostly everything is going to be right here in your working area. So from that working area, this tractor consists of an engine, which is housed under this hood cover. You have the engine, then you have right behind that you have the transmission, and right behind that then you have your rear end that your two wheels here run off of. And so I'm gonna go over some of these, but I will get more into some of the stuff whenever we go into the basic operation. There is some tractors out there now that run off hydrostatic. They actually have a hydrostatic transmission in them. It's forward and reverse, and all you gotta do is push a pedal forward and push a pedal back. If you're gonna do any kind of, I don't want to say major farming, but I'm a simple person, and the simpler it is, I feel like the more control that I have over the situation. Like this tractor, it has a clutch, and then on the other side it's got 2 brakes. It's got a brake for each wheel. So if when I'm turning or stopping or that kind of thing, I can have more control if I need to turn or stop or that kind of thing. So okay, so from that you have a transmission. This here is this transmission here is 4 forward and 4 reverse with a 2-speed. So I've got 8 forward and 8 reverse. This one comes equipped with a shuttle shifter, which lets me, if I want to, not have to deal with the manual clutch, but I can just take this thing and shift it forward and reverse, and it's a hydraulic clutch, so it takes care of itself and goes forward. Okay, and then you have the front axles and then the rear axle, and then let's come this way and we'll go around and show them a 3-point. So this is what you call a 3-point hitch. This down here is your drawbar. So with the 3-point hitch, this is where your implements come in. Here's an example. I got the hay fork right now. Now this here, it's different. People call them different things. Some call this a top link. Some call this a 3rd arm. When I was growing up, that's all we knew was a 3rd arm. But people call it top link. This one here's got a lift arm on this side, one on this side, which makes your 3rd. This tractor here, because it's new, a newer model, it has the sway control arms on it that you can control the sway of the lift arms. A lot of your older tractors didn't have that. You had to manually or had a long piece of steel with 2 holes in it that hooked up underneath. For example, I've got an 8N forward, 1952 8N, and that one, on that particular tractor, there's a little hitch underneath there. You have to put a piece of steel there, and that's how you controlled where your 3rd arm, or not your 3rd arm, but your 3-point hitch stayed. Because if you had a tobacco setter, for a prime example, your tobacco setter needs to go in a straight row, and if a tobacco setter went up, then you want it in a straight line. Okay. While we're here, you'll see this little gadget right here. These little gadgets here is a hydraulic control. This unit has 1 set on it. And when I say 1 set, what I mean is if you have something that has up and down, then you'll have to have 2 hoses. Some pieces of equipment run off gravity, as you can let down and lift up on the same system, some of your older units. And these could, but a lot of your newer equipment stuff has downward pressure as well as upward pressure. So that's why you have 1 unit. And if you got 2 different points on a piece of equipment that need to move in different, then they make additionals that you can put on here. It just stacks on top and gives you more. Okay, the other thing, I'll take you around here in a minute and show you the loader controls. This thing right here, this is the fuel. These are the important things that you need to, now this fuel positioning, the tank and all that, every tractor is different. So now the other thing back here is right down here is a little dipstick. If you can see right here with my finger, that's a little dipstick for the hydraulic and hydraulic and rear end fluid level check. So, okay, and then right below this, I've still got the cover on it. You'll see this thing right here and this is called a PTO shaft. This is a line that comes in for like an implement. Let's just say you want to run a tiller or a mow machine or a hay bind or a hay baler or whatever. Runs off PTO, and that's where it'll hook up. Now, there's two types. You have a 540 PTO and you have 1,000. The big difference is here is the splines. If you look at the splines on the video, this here has got I think 7 splines on it. Let me see, make sure I don't want to tell you wrong. No, 6 splines, whereas a 1,000 PTO is going to have many, many more. Okay, and you do have pieces of equipment that run 540 and some run 1,000. That's also another factor whenever you start looking at your equipment. You have to make sure that you get it right, because if you buy a piece of equipment that requires 1,000 PTO and you get a 540, then you're going to have to get some kind of conversion and all that. It's going to be a mess. So, okay, so let's go around and we'll walk around the front of the tractor, and I'll go over the controls for the loader, and then I'll show you the oil dipstick, which is very important for the motor. Okay, so right here you'll see that's the dipstick for the motor. Okay, that helps the oil levels. Behind here, behind this screen in the cab, this here is that's where the battery and the antifreeze and stuff on this tractor is. In here, the access it. And that access that you get right there, and that way you can see it right there, and it gives you good access. Air filters right here, water over there, battery here. Now on other tractors, they're in different places. So anytime that you get a tractor, just familiarize yourself with that tractor. Okay, you want to come on around. Okay, the brakes I was telling you about a while ago, you may not have seen or know, but right here's the brakes. I've got them locked together right now because that's the way I use them. But if I want to separate them, and I can separate them like that. And I've got this brake locked down because we're sitting here, but these brakes can be used individually. Right here, this little gadget, it's a foot feed. What that is, it's a foot throttle, which does the exact same thing as this. It's just this one stays in position and this one's operated by your foot. You let off of it and it comes back to idle. If you're out working in a field or something, you got a piece of equipment and you want a constant RPM, I recommend this, because once you set it, that's where it's going to be, and then the governors on the engine will take care of the rest and do what you need to do. If you got your foot here, and let's just say you're going across the field and you're baling hay or something, you got your foot on a foot throttle, you hit a big hole or something, you let off and your foot hits it, and then you got a real quick deceleration and then a real quick acceleration. You know, we don't want to hurt our piece of equipment or our tractor. So, okay, this gadget right here on this tractor is the loader operation. This and it comes plumbed in. Now, some of your older pieces of equipment or some of your older tractors, you can put loaders on them, but they don't come with this. You have to get valves and stuff that you can mount. Like right here, you can get loaders that on this part of it, they have different hookups, and there's actually a piece of steel comes out here, and there's a operation valve right here that operates all your stuff, and you just run around and hook it into the controls in the back, and that's how you operate your loader. Now, old versus new on loader, there's not a lot of difference. You can put newer loaders on older tractors as long as they're not old, really old. Some of your really old pieces of equipment, your 40s and 50s, if you get a loader for them, they're most likely going to be a single cylinder here, which consists of upward and downward motion. And the bucket that goes on the front is actually what they call a trip bucket. And it has a cable that comes up and runs along this arm and comes up, and then you have a long pole here that when you let it down, it snaps in position and you do what you need to do, and then you take it, you just grab this and the bucket trips and dumps it, and you set it back down and it resets itself, and then you go on about your business. So loaders have definitely come a long way in the modern farming. Now, some of the safety features that I want to go over, old versus new. Well, number one thing is you see this rollover protection system? The reason I have mine down is because this here actually, I can unscrew this and flip it up. The only reason I have mine down is I have flat ground right now, and to get in access to my barn and sheds, I have to have it down because I'm feeding hay through the winter. And so those right there are made for 3 turns. If you were to roll over a hill, those are supposed to withstand 3 turns of your tractor. Now, it's only effective if you have this seatbelt on. Okay? And people says, well, I don't like seatbelts. I don't want to wear a seatbelt on a tractor. Well, I understand, but if you want your rollover protection system to work, then your seatbelt needs to be intact in order for that to work. People say, well, you know, how are you going to turn a tractor over on level ground? It can happen. Remember back at the beginning of the video when I told you 8,000 pound versus 8,000 pound? Well, I got 2 8,000 pounds objects. The only difference in 8,000 pound objects moving together is these tires right here. Okay, now let's throw in the extra element. What if the ground's wet? I start scooting. Well, when I start scooting, these are no longer effective because now I'm gathering under the tires, and that load could care less. That load is pushing me whether I like it or not. So if you're on a small, very small slope, you get to scooting and you end up going out in the field. If you're lucky, you'll be able to coast that into a level spot and get by, but there have been cases to where a load will go sideways and hit you and then jackknife you and throw your tractor, and then you can't turn over. One thing I do want to throw in about the weights though is 8,000 pound in a gravity bed versus 8,000 pound on a trailer is a lot different. Okay, most trailers you work with are, you try to get the axle positioning about 60-40. You want 60% in front, 40% behind. The reason why you do that is because if you position your loads right, you don't want all the weight on what you're hauling, on the vehicle or the tractor that you're hauling, but you want to add some to it. So if I've got 8,000 pound here and 8,000 pound back there, well, if I position it on a appropriate trailer, then now I can take that 8,000 pound, it is 8,000, but I can take some of that and position it forward. And now I went from 8,000 here to maybe 9,000 here, and I'm a little bit lighter back there. So that puts more weight here in order for me to hold back and to do a little bit better with that implement. But and then you do have slopes versus flat. That's going to change the position of your weights. That's going to change the position of your tractor. Oh, and the other thing is, I meant to talk about the open station. They call it an open station operation unit for a tractor. They do have closed cabs. They have cabs, and they call that a closed station. So just to give you a little bit more information, a little bit more detailed about what goes on here. Okay, we're just going to start one point and go to the other. So remember the clutch and brake I talked about? Here's the clutch. Here's your double brakes over here. Okay, for a brake for each wheel. I have your throttle here. Here is your manual throttle. I have my shuttle shifter in this position. Headlight switches and all here. This little switch here on this tractor is the brake set. You always want to lock the brakes whenever you're not using, lock the brakes, because you just never know when something's going to happen, and you just don't want your tractor to roll off and hurt somebody or hurt something. So now here's a positioning. As you can see where the seat lies here, everything is in arm's reach. So here's the controls that I talked about for the loader. Okay, now this little critter right here, this is my four positions of the transmission. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, it depends on the high side of the axle or the low side of the axle, which is going to change the speed in which I want to travel across the ground. It's ground speed travel. And if I see it with this and that, I've got fast and slow, or high and low, with 4, and then I go forward, so I got 8 speeds forward and 8 speeds back. But it's a very, very basic transmission. There's a lot of transmissions out there that have, I know Massey Ferguson has, oh gosh, there is a high and a low, and then you've got high, medium, and low again, and they just torque the transmissions down so that, or speed them up so you can get more use out of that transmission. Where this one here is, you know, it's all about what you want to spin. It's all about what you want to spin. All right, this right here is your PTO engagement. With new tractors, this one here is what you call live or independent power. The old tractors, like that 1952 8N I've got, it actually, the PTO has to be engaged before the lift arms will actually work. And also it's a direct drive. What's called direct drive is when you have this in gear and you have the PTO engaged to an implement. If you need to slow down, whatever centrifugal force, let's just say you're in a bush hog, that centrifugal force of that bush hog will continue to push you because it's a direct drive in a transmission, whereas this one here is totally, it's totally independent. I can turn it off and on anytime I want to. Now, one thing they do recommend is when you turn these on, because they are independent, they don't run with the transmission, is if you turn this on while the tractor is in an idle position, because you do not want to twist your PTO shaft going to your implement. You don't want to twist it or put stress on it whenever you do it. This little gadget here, this is the rear remote control. That's what those are called, those two little things I told you about the hydraulic. They're called rear remotes. This right here is your 3-point hitch lift arm. This is just your basic 3-point hitch back there. And then we have our fine little coffee cup holder down here, which I absolutely love. Your seat belt again's right here. Your seat belt comes over and hitches in. And it clips in just like your car. So if you can operate a car seat belt, you can operate a tractor seat belt. And then this one here's got your, I've got a little toolbox here on this. When your tractor comes new, when your tractor comes new, if you get a new one, right here at the back, you'll see this thing right here. There's actually a triangle that goes in there for going down the road and stuff. I took it out because every time I turned around, I was hitting it with my elbow, and I don't travel on the road. So, okay. Some more things that you'll see on here that a lot of your older tractors didn't have is positioning of the lights. This one here has actually got 4-way flashers and it got turn-in signals. A lot of your older tractors don't have those. That 1952 don't have that. Matter of fact, It had a work light that sits on the back with a red light that just faces the back. It's just a red light that faces the back. It's a caution. But it did have 2 headlights on it. Trying to think if there's anything else that I need to tell you. Old versus new. Safety issues. Oh, let me show you this real quick. Another safety issue. On this tractor right here, see this little dude right here? As long as that PTO shaft is in gear and you're sitting in a seat, it will work. If you come out of the seat, when that comes up, you have the most obnoxious sound under your seat. It's like a screaming sound. It's just a warning to help you remind yourself that you need to sit back down and be careful what you're doing. So, oh, and one other thing I forgot, if we can get the camera on it here, is over here, this two-speed here. Okay, well, right below it, you'll see another little thing right here. What that is, a lot of your older tractors did not have it. That's called a differential lock. If you start to spin or something, you can actually push that down. It will actually lock your differential together. You go from one wheel to both wheels pulling. Like the 1952 8N did not have that. You just had to work through it with brakes and stomp on the brakes and make it scratch and dig and see if you could get out and that kind of thing. So, other than that, I think that ought to get us today. I don't want to put too much on you at one time, but thanks for watching, and we'll see what we can get you on the next video and see if we can help you out on the basic stuff.